Hi, everybody. Good evening. Sincerest apologies for the technical glitches. I presume that everyone can hear me right now. Is that a fair presumption? Yes. Okay. So without further ado, and I will say further ado because on my end of the technicalities, we have Miss Cavell Hylton. She's the founder and executive director of STEM Builders Learning Hub, and she will be the facilitator of this evening's webinar. For those who might not know, Cavell is a passionate educator, entrepreneur, and a champion for STEM across Jamaica and, of course, the rest of us in the Caribbean because there's still more of us. But she has 2.5 decades of experience transforming the way young people engage in science, tech, and engineering, and of course, math. Not my favorite thing, but calculators work today. Like I said before, she is the founder and CEO of STEM Builders Learning Hub, and she is on a bold, I would underline and capitalize the word bold mission to establish an organization as the premier STEM education institution in the Caribbean. So she's hoping that that STEM Builders is the premier within the next 1.5 decades. Her impact has earned her a lot of regional accolades, including the 2024 Governor General's Achievement Award, as well as the YLAI Alumni and Impact Grant recipient of 2025 winners of the Masters Business Pitch Competition hosted by the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, I believe, in Jamaica. So, guided by the belief that every child deserves the tools to innovate and lead, she is not just building business, she is, well, building the future of the Caribbean. So without further ado, I am happy to hand over to Cavell to lead us on into our webinar this evening.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're able to hear me clearly. Let me know if you're hearing me clearly and if you're able to see my screen. So I'm presently sharing my presentation. Let me know if you're able to hear me clearly and if you can see my screen. All right. Yes to both. Awesome. All right. So as Sir mentioned, my name is Cabell Hilton. I'm the CEO and founder of STEM Builders, and I'm happy to be here with you today. Thank you for coming. I want to start by asking, how are you feeling today? So how are you feeling? Can you drop some emojis in the chat to let me know how you're feeling today? Tired, sad, excited? How are you feeling? So Nadine raised her hand. Nadine, you want to open your microphone and tell me how you're feeling? Okay, I see a lot of tired and exhausted. Okay, oh no. Oh no. Impatient. Wow. Wow. All right. So my next question to you is, how do you feel about the modular approach that CSEC is now taking as it relates to the integrated science exam? How do you feel about that? Think it's a good approach, confused, uncertain. Okay. Keep them coming, keep them coming. I want to just just take a little check to see where you're at. I think it's a good initiative. Okay. Good for the students, uncertain. All right. Okay, so I see where you're at, unsure. Okay, awesome. All right. Okay. So some persons have expressed that they understand what it is about and they think it's a good approach for the students, while some persons feel a bit unsure, not really sure what to expect. So I'm here today to talk to you about this, and that's where I'm going to start my presentation, right? So let's start with the roadmap to today's presentation. So today I'll be looking at the modular model. I'll also be looking at the textbook as your map and guide and planning a module, how students are assessed, the SBA in practice, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to try a few things, all right? So let's start with the modular model. So what does this mean? So of course we know that you have the three modules, sorry, and the three micro-credentials, but one award. So what that means is that each module is a complete freestanding unit. So there's no prerequisite chain, and each of them is basically worth its own micro-credential. So a candidate can really just enter for one module, two, or for all three in any order, and they have up to 4 years to complete the full subject. So this is important because you may have students that are at different levels and they may only be able to manage one module. And so it's important that this offers that sort of differentiation for them as it relates to taking the exam, right? So if they are not able to do all three modules, they can do one module or two modules, or if they're able to do all three, then at that stage, they will get the full credential. But before that, what they would earn is a micro credential for each module that they complete. So the modules, as you know, you have module one, which is organisms and life processes, and you earn 1 credit or micro credential for that, and it takes 45 hours to complete. Module two is energy, 45 hours, 1 credit, micro-credential earned as well. Module three is our planet, 45 hours, 1 credit, and that's a micro-credential that is earned. So a student would have to complete all three modules in order to earn the full CSEC Integrated Science Intermediate qualification, right? And a student who passes a module with grades A to C banks it. So if they pass just one module, say module one, then they are able to go and sit module two, maybe in the next sitting, and they can continue therefore. They don't have to resit the entire exam, which was the previous approach. So the previous approach was that if you fail the exam, you have to resit everything. With this modular approach, each module stands on its own, right? So students can sit by module, one module now. Maybe if you have grade 10 and 11 students, they may start and grade 10 students will sit one module, and you have a grade 10 sit two modules, but at the end, they would have the full credential that they need, right? Resits as well only repeat what's not yet passed. So if you resit, you don't have to resit the entire exam. If you have passed module one already, or you did really well in module two, then you only resit what you did not pass. All right, with me so far, everybody? Yes? Okay, got it. Cool. All right. So there are 3 papers for the exam, but it's the same structure for every module, which is great because then that means um, you don't have to be worrying too much about it in terms of the module because it's the same structure, right? And as you can see, all 3 modules, each of them, it's 45 hours. So they're basically weighted sort of the same where that part is concerned in terms of the length of time that it will take to complete them. All right, so let's look at the paper. So paper one, 60 multiple choice questions, but you get 20 per module. So this will mainly test your knowledge and comprehension. But again, it's 20 per module. So module one would do 20 multiple choice, module two, 20, and so forth. For paper two, there are 6 questions, 2 questions per module. So the first in each module is a practical question, and this is worth like 20 marks, which we're going to get back to where that part is concerned, because that is very important, right? Paper 3 now, as we know, is the SBA, because your students are sitting the exam in school. Only private candidates will sit like an alternative paper. So the SBA is weighted at 21%. This is a school-based assessment of the practical skills, and it's marked to CXC's criteria. So we have 29% for paper 1, 50% for paper 2, and 21% for paper 3. And again, it's per module. So even for the SBA, right? So that helps. So half the marks, and it actually also rewards practical thinking. So each module's paper 2 has 2 structured questions, as we mentioned before. The first is always a practical or investigative question, which is worth 20 marks. The second is worth 15. And so the single biggest question that your students really face and that you have to think about is the whole thing of doing science. So, talk about learning by doing, right? So your students must be doing the science. They must be investigating. They must be doing practical activities, not just recall, right? And that is what we see for paper 2. It's a 20 marks for that investigative question. All right. So teaching implication. So what you need to do for this then is to ensure that in your everyday lessons, it's really built around that investigation. And when you're preparing and thinking about SBA, you have to also note that you're also preparing the students for paper 2. So through those labs and investigation, and all of those activities that you have to complete, it's not just about the SBA. It's also about preparing the students to sit the paper 2 exam, which I know, we are aware of already. So every module is basically scored the same way. So this is an assessment grade, right? So for one module, you have 70 weighted marks, and that's split across 3 skill dimensions. So knowing the split is important. So paper 1, for example, you have knowledge and comprehension, which is 15. Use of knowledge 5. No experimental skills are assessed in paper 1. The total for the module is 20, right? Paper 2, 15 for knowledge and comprehension, 15 for use of knowledge, 5 for experimental skills, a total 35. Paper 3, which is the SBA, looks at use of knowledge and experimental skills, total 15, right? And then so it's weighted over that, so to about 70. So that is important. Any questions there? Okay, so I see some questions. She said, since now there is a practical question for each module, would there be any adjustment to the timing of the paper? Well, there wouldn't be any adjustment because remember, the students would be sitting, well, some students may be sitting the entire thing, but it's a modular approach. So they're sitting based on the module. So what it is saying is not that they necessarily have to do everything. Because say you're only doing module 1, then you're only doing the questions that relate to module 1, right? You wouldn't be doing everything. And if you're doing 2 modules, then you'd just be doing the questions for each module. Yes, so they can do each module at an exam. So say you have your grade 10 students and you want them to sit module 1. So you can do that. So they would just sit module 1 only. What they will earn is a micro-credential, 1 credit, right? And then they will move now to, if they want to do module 2 and module 3 in grade 11. So another question is, who decides the modules? So we're going to go through that in terms of how you decide which module to start at, what's the best approach. So we're going to look at that. Yes, module 1 would have. So we're going to look at that. So I'm just going to wait until we just answer all of this. But I'm keeping those questions. I've seen them. So I'll be touching on each of those questions. All right, let's look now. So 5 skills assessed twice. So this answers a question about the SBA and what practicals you would be doing for each module. So let's look at that in detail. So the SBA is graded coursework. We know it's not a one-off exam. You're going to assess 5 practical skills using CXC's own mark scheme. So you don't have to make your any mark scheme here. You're using what is given to you, right? You can check the syllabus. It's also there. Each skill is assessed at least twice across the 2 years. So again, as I said, you could start one module, let the students sit module 1 exam in grade 10, and then in grade 11, they could do 2 more modules, depending, on the ability of your students. So you may have some students that are fast. You may have students that, are, maybe need a little bit more help. So you may say, okay, I'm going to choose this module for this set of students to start with. And so you can decide, because the modules are independent, they don't require any prerequisite knowledge. So they are not dependent on each other. So the previous approach was that when you're teaching something, so say, for example, we have to teach cells first before you teach circulatory system and all of that. And while the topics are still related to each other and still somewhat depends on some knowledge, the modules are independent. So remember, module 1 is looking at organisms, unit of life. Module 2 is energy, right? Module 3 is our planet, looking at the environment, all of that. So the modules are independent. So it doesn't matter which module you start with. Hope that is clear. So as it relates relates to the SBA now, we have planning and designing, the P&D, that's 10 marks. M&M, manipulation and measurement. Observation, recording and reporting. Analysis and interpretation and drawing. And as I said before, each module is assessed twice except for the drawing. So you only need to do one drawing. Only one will be marked. Not saying that you should only do one for the entire year, but only one would be graded or counted towards the SBA. Is that clear? So someone is asking if they could start the syllabus from Form 3. Again, that may be a curriculum decision that you would make at the school and decide how you want to approach it, because that could be a good approach. Because remember, the SBA would last them for 4 years. And so so if they wanted to start, maybe, because in most cases in schools, they would start CSEC syllabus, whether it's biology, chemistry, they would start it from grade 9. And then in grade 10, they would pick up from there. So maybe they don't sit the exam in grade 9, but they would cover the content for module 1 or module 2. And then in grade 10, they would sit 2 modules. So in grade 11, they would only have 1 module left to sit. Again, this all depends on what you want to do, your approach. So another question is, the skills are linked to the modules for the exam. Yes, so the skills are linked. So in every module, and we're going to look at that going further down in the presentation. In every module, you have opportunities to assess a skill. And I want to make sure that everyone understand as well that you don't wait until it's a SBA to have the students practice and learn that particular skill. So say, for example, you're doing module 1, there are opportunities for you to do a P&D in module 1. You don't have to wait until module 3 or module 2. You can look at all of these skills, have the students practice, but again, only 2 of those will count towards the SBA. Because again, here we have planning and design, 10 marks. In total, you would have 100. So here we have 50 in total here. So when we add this up, we get 50. So 50 for each year. So grade 10 would be 50. grade 11, another 50. So 100 over the 2-year SBA. So that is the same. So you could just assess one P&D, one M&M, one ORR, one AI, and one drawing in year 1. And in year 2, you do the same, but you wouldn't need to do another drawing in year 2 because you would already have that. All right. All right, so I'm seeing clarification, please. Has there been a reversal in students having to complete SBA before writing any modules? I'm going to check on that for you, but I do believe, as usual, you would need to submit your SBA grade before you sit the exam. I don't think that changed, right? So if you're doing a module, because remember, the SBA grade is basically the paper 3, so it's counting towards your overall grade. All right, so the fun part now. The textbook. The textbook. So the textbook is your map and it is your guide. So a lot of questions that you were asking can be answered, through the textbook. So we're looking at the 4th edition for the Integrated Science CSEC examination, right? And it's going to be, this textbook really does a specific job in the modular system. That is, the textbook is already organized by the 3 modules, right? So the content already follows the flow in the syllabus. So when you open the textbook, you're going to see chapter 1, which is basically module 1, right? Organisms and life. Then you're going to see energy, which is module 2. Then you're going to see our planet, which is module 3. So it's already organized based on the modules. Next, in the textbook, you also have exam style questions. You have paper 1 questions, paper 2 questions, and then again, remember that for paper 1, if you're only doing module 1, they would only do 20 multiple choice questions for module 1, right? I see some more questions in the chat. Okay. All right, so person says they're very confused about the SBA component. So do you want me to just double back with the SBA component? What question is that? Does manipulation and measurement now have a mark scheme? Is that yes? So they all have mark schemes. They all have mark schemes. All right, let me just go back a little bit. And I believe I do have a slide that looks at exactly what is being marked for each. So here you are seeing competent, safe, accurate use of apparatus and measuring instruments, right? And again, as I said, CXC has its own mark schemes. You do not need to make up a mark scheme for any of these skills. The mark schemes are provided. All right. Yes, so you send a child to do module 1, he would do 20 multiple choice questions for the paper 1. He would do 2 structured questions for paper 2, and his SBA grade that you would mark would count to the paper 3. All 3 grades combined would give him the credential for module 1 only. Is that clear now? So some persons are asking how long would the exam be? Well, that would be determined by CXC, right? They would determine, because it could be that they put it. I'm not sure if they finalize how the papers are going to look where that part is concerned. But yeah, that's something to look at again. So 3 papers per module, right? That is the approach. So 3 papers per module. Paper 1, well, 3, not 3 exactly, because remember the 3rd paper is the SBA. So some persons are asking, so 1 SBA grade is used for all 3 modules. Again, remember the skill is assessed twice. So if your student is in grade 10, once they complete that first set of SBAs, which is a 50%, they can sit the module and then, they do the rest in grade 11. The SBA component covers the entire subject and it keeps you for the 4 years. So say, this is important, I think we just need to just take a breath and look at it. Let's go again. You complete the SBA, right? Haven't you had students who do very well in the SBA and they get like grades for the SBA that can be used, but when they go and they sit the actual exam, they fail it? Yes or no for that? Right? You have students who do the SBA, but when they go and they take the exam, they fail the exam. Now, this module approach is saying to you, even if they fail the exam, the SBA is going to be, they can use that SBA grade for the next 4 years. So say they fail module 1, they still have their SBA grade in their back pocket. So next year they can go and resit module 1. Say they fail module 2, they can still use that SBA grade and go and resit module 2. Are we understanding that now? So the SBA grade is used for all of the modules. So wait, so all of the SBAs can come from. No, you wouldn't have all the SBAs. There's no specific thing for this. But why would you assess? Why would you have all the SBAs coming from one module? Hmm? So she's saying, because you said the SBA, save the SBA grade, I'm saying if you fail the exam. So I'm saying if a student goes to sit the exam and they fail the exam, their SBA grade is still good. They just need to resit the module and they can reuse the SBA grades. Not just the final, but even for the modules. They're still completing all the topics. All the topics need to be completed. But once again, you're assessing each skill twice. You're assessing each skill twice. Now, we're educators. We know how to organize and structure a thing. And I'm going to give you a little activity where this part is concerned. So don't worry, I'm going to come back to it. Don't worry. All right. So the planning and design part, you need to assess that twice. And notice it says 5 skills assessed twice over 2 years. So they're assuming grade 10 and 11. They're assuming grade 10 and 11. So they're assuming that in grade 10, you are going to allow your students to complete 50% of the SBA. And in grade 11, you're going to complete the other 50%. Okay? There are different options where the exam is concerned. So based on the ability of your students, you may have them sit 2 modules or all 3 modules, and you decide to listen, they must sit everything one time, and the SBA grade is going to go up with that, and just like usual, what usually take place. Okay? So you have that option. So if your student starts in Form 3, can they do any SBA assessments in Form 3? All right, so from my understanding, if a child does one module, there must be an SBA mark that covers practicals for all the modules. Again, think about it. They're assuming that you're going to do 50% of the modules in grade 10 and another 50% in grade 11. I'm saying to you, when your students are ready to sit the exam, you can decide how many modules of the exam they are going to sit. They can sit all 3 modules like usual. The only difference is if they failed one of those modules, they do not have to sit back the entire exam. They only resit the module that they failed. All right, so someone said assuming is not prescribing. Which is it? So look at this, and this is the syllabus. This is taken directly from the syllabus. The syllabus says 5 skills assessed twice over 2 years. 5 skills assessed twice over 2 years. So the SBA is graded coursework. You assess the 5 practical skills using the mark scheme. Each skill is assessed at least twice across the 2 years. The drawing once. So it's not to say that your students will not be doing an investigation, doing M&M, but it's just that you're only going to use 2 of those grades out of the entire thing. All right. So yeah, so the syllabus has the investigative project outlined. Yes, that is correct. So you still have the P&D where you have to do the implementation and all of that. So regardless of how many modules they are sitting, they must have all the SPs, that is the 5 skills assessed twice. Correct, correct, correct. But what we're seeing is that at end of grade 11, say your students sat the entire exam, all 3 modules, but they only pass module 1. They will still earn a credential, a micro credential, 1 credit. So when they leave school, if they want to redo the exam, they don't have to resit the entire exam. Instead, they can resit only the modules that they failed. Is that any clearer? In a way, because, and then it's not just about, so someone is saying if this is all about students who want to resit, it's helping students who want to resit for sure. So it will be helping students to make it easy if they want to resit instead of having to do the whole paper. So you know what, before you could have been really good at the cells part, but you didn't do so well in on the our planets part. You have to do the entire paper once again. You don't have to do that now. You only resit the part that you fail. So if students are writing all 3 modules in one sitting, that means they will get the entire paper, which is what? 20 multiple choice questions from each module. So they get 60 multiple choice questions. 2 structured questions from each module. So that's 6 questions. I think I showed that slide earlier. All right, so let's get back to it because I don't want to get off target too much. I'm gonna answer some of those questions again afterwards. All right, so let's continue. So the textbook. The textbook is your map and your guide. As I said, it's already organized by the 3 modules. There are exam style questions in the textbook. You have paper 1 and 2 practice questions. And it comes with a mark scheme that is available online. I went and downloaded this mark scheme yesterday. It's pretty easy and straightforward. All you have to do is register on the Macmillan website and select find the subject that you're doing. There's a code. You put in the code and you add it. You add the subject and the resource is just right there. I literally was able to download the entire ITQ mark scheme as a PDF onto my computer. So feel free to do that if you haven't done so. There are also revision maps on in the textbook. So you have visual topic links which show students how topics within a module connect for the paper too. You have the leveled ITQs, which are color-coded, as mentioned before, and there's differentiation where that is concerned. So you have recall questions, application questions, right? And then there's also the experimental skill section. So you see some of those questions that you have about the SBA and how you're going to grade the M&M and how you're going to do this for that for each skill. Check out the experimental skill section in the textbook. It's very good. You know, I remember when I was a young teacher, because I've been teaching for over 15 years, but I remember when I just started out, experimental skill section and any textbook that have this component was my best friend because I wanted to ensure that I was giving my students the correct information on how to prepare for each lab, right? So what are the drawing do's and don'ts? How do you create a graph? How do you do a chart? All of this. This is your best friend as far as I'm concerned, where the SBA is concerned, where when you're talking about SBA. There's also a ready scheme of work. So each chapter gives you that 45-hour teaching path that you need. So it's basically a lesson plan already, right? So you can just choose the topic from the module that you're teaching and basically plan your lesson from there. So it's your planning block backbone. All right. So someone is saying for module one, you need about 8 labs in all. Remember, the skill is only going to be assessed once for grade 10. So it's only 50% for that. Modules are better for the weak students. Exactly. For the students who are not so strong in some of those schools, who they are, it's good that they can do the modular approach, replying to, and it's only recent to elect or students, teachers deem as not ready. Will we be seeing sample pages from this book? Okay, let me show you some stuff. All right, so you saw the book earlier. This is what the book. This is what the book looks like, right? This is what the book looks like. I do have a physical copy here with me. In addition to that, the book also would have the SBA ready practicals. So each practical maps to a different topic and builds the SBA skills cumulatively, right? So units of life. I took this from the book, Observing Osmosis Through Living Cells. So when you do the units of life module, this is a SB that a practical activity that you would normally complete. Again, you can decide which one of those practical activities you're going to assess in the sense that you're going to make count towards the SBA grade. All right. So for observing osmosis through living cells, a skill that you can assess for this one is ORR and analysis, right? So you can look at observation, recording, and reporting for this particular lab. Now, energy of life processes. This is another experiment or investigative activity that you can do. Investigate the amount of energy released from a peanut by burning, right? So that is taken from the textbook as well. And the skill that can be assessed here is measurement and manipulation, or manipulation and measurement. All right. Investigating the degree of hardness. All right, there's a spelling error for that one. Investigate the degree of hardness of water. So that's analysis and interpretation. So you can take that one again from the textbook. So what I'm trying to show you is that each module in the textbook would have a whole set of practical activities that you should do with your students. Because remember, the practical activities are not just about the SBA. You are also preparing your students for paper 2. And the first question on the paper 2 is an investigative question, which is worth 20 marks. Okay? So what I am saying and what I'm imploring you to do is ensure that you do enough practical activities with your students. So if you want to do 18 practical activities, but you're only going to assess each skill twice over the 2-year period. Okay? Hope that is clear as crystal. All right, so someone want to see the cover of the book. I will definitely be doing that. All right, so please take a screenshot of the book. And as I said to you, the book is excellent. So this is the book, Success at CSEC Integrated Science for CSEC Examinations, 4th edition, written by Tania Chung. Sorry, hope I didn't butcher her name, right? So that is it. Got it? Publisher, Macmillan Education. Everybody got that? You can do a screenshot of it. So please take a screenshot of the book. How am I doing with time, sir?
You are 47, 48 minutes in, so you might have 12 to maybe 15, 17 minutes extra if you wish.
Yes. I'm seeing some burning questions, regarding the SBA. I want to make sure that I leave a little,
Yes, please,
some
please do
time
check
at
them
the
because
end
I
to
too am
go through
scratching
it
my head
once
about them.
more. Yes, for sure. All right. So again, we have the SBA ready practicals. Now, there in the textbook, you also have the leveled ITQs that I mentioned after each practical. And I love this part of it as well. And I told you about, how excited I was about experimental skills section. So the leveled ITQs, what we're saying is that you, depending on the student's ability, you may decide, what questions you're going to ask them. So it could be a recall question, like name the variable that you changed, right? Explain why the beer cup cooled the fastest, evaluate 2 sources of error and improve the method. So those are all different types of questions that are available in the textbook after the practical activity. I love that part because you know how when you give the students the lab and they follow the method and they write up the lab, you want to make sure that they also have discussion questions that they're going to use to, guide them on the path for the what you really want for the discussion. You want to have those discussion questions. So the textbook would already provide you with those questions that the students need to complete the discussion. All right, so I like that part. Now here is the mark scheme again for the SBA skills, right? So let's look at this one. Planning and designing. So what you're looking for: clear hypothesis, fair test, whether the variables were identified, manipulation and measurement. You're looking for safe. So you're looking at safety, accurate results. You're looking for repeated readings with the units included. So those are some of the things that you mark for. Observation, recording, and reporting. The table must be neat. They should have their correct graph. They should label their axis. The presentation of the entire lab that is written up must be clear and neat. All of that. Analysis and interpretation, right? They should have a good conclusion, right? Error evaluation. So they look at their sources of error, limitations, all of that. And it should link back to the theory. So what they were learning in class, right? So those are some of the things that you look for when you're marking each SBA skill. All right, just checking it. Any questions for that, or we're good so far? We're good now? All right, so let's look at SBA in practice. So let's look at a worked example of a SBA that you might be doing. So say you're looking at exercise and pulse rate. How does physical activity affect human pulse rate, right? So you would look at your variables, your independent, your dependent, and your controlled variables there. You have the method, you give the students that method. And they should be looking at their expected result. For SBA like this now, what are some skills that you can assess? You can do a P&D. So you could ask them to, you could give them a problem and then ask them to create their own method and all of that. And you could also do the implementation part of it that you need to do as well. Measurement, accurate repeated pulse counts, analysis and interpretation, the trend in the graph, a valid conclusion that they must have for this particular lab. All right, so someone said this is a standard lab and therefore a poor choice. Notice I said that if you are doing a lab like this, would you give it in this particular form or would you adapt it? So that's a question for Mr. Ronald Worrell. You feel free to answer. If you have a lab and you want to investigate pulse rate, would you just write it as investigate the pulse rate? Or would you give the students a question, a problem statement to say, your neighbor, for example, John, noticed that his pulse rate is X and so forth. So you give them that sort of problem or scenario, and then now they have to come up with the idea of how they're going to measure pulse rate. And again, this is just an example. So, Mr. Warren, feel free to respond to that question if you can. All right. No, no response as yet. Okay. All right. Now, as I said, I've been teaching science, biology, all of that for over 15 years. And I've come up with some pretty interesting P&Ds over the years as well. It's really up to you as an educator. And again, the textbook have some really good ones that you can check out, right? So the textbook have some really good labs and it will identify which one is a P&D versus which lab is best for M&M and which lab is best for observation, recording, and reporting. Again, that also is about the teacher's experience and their ability as well. As I've in many instances, you may see a lab, you don't necessarily have to take it directly from the textbook as it is given. Sometimes you can adapt it as well, to make it your own or to also ensure that your students' interest will be piqued when you're teaching it. And, they will get what they need to get out of it. All right, is that clear, everyone? All right. So Miss Wright said she has done it as a PD, AI, and ML. So it really just depends on how you phrase it. Excellent. So phrasing the lab as a question or observation does not mean that they can't pick up a textbook and know the answer. Well, that is true, but I'm sure you would be doing more than just phrasing it as a question or observation. I'm sure you'll be asking them something. And let's face it, we're in an age now where you shouldn't be worrying about the fact that I'm going to pick up a textbook. You know why? They have AI, and that is something that you're going to have to contend with. They don't have to take up a textbook to see the answers. They can ask AI. So what your focus should be on whether or not they're going to basically be able to learn the skill, and that's what you want them to do. You want them to acquire the skill at the end of the lab. You want them to be able to plan and design an experiment on their own, understand that the method must be written a certain way, understand the variables that need to be included in a P&D. That is what you're looking for. Okay? So let's focus more on that. Well, thank you for the feedback as well. All right, acid rain and seed germination. So say, for example, they were looking at seed germination. This could be a good analysis and interpretation lab as well. So, and as an educator, you can decide which skill you want to assess for the lab. As I said before, the textbook is great in that you kind of get an idea from the textbook which lab is best, which skill is best for which lab, right? Or which activity. So even for the P&D, it will phrase it exactly as a P&D with the observation, in the textbook. So you will see that. All right. So this is where now I say to you, can you adapt one practical for your own classroom? So say you were to look at one of those experiments. This is one I took from the textbook where it says plan and design an investigation to separate substances based on physical properties, right? This was actually not a P&D lab, but a regular investigation lab. And the students were to investigate how to separate substances based on their physical properties. So I want you to look at this now and maybe tell me. I don't think we have enough time to maybe like do a breakout group, but anybody can just type it in the chat. How would you adapt this lab? Because when you're adapting a lab, you have to also remember that you're using the resources that you have available to you at your school. And in the syllabus, as well as in the textbook, it ensures that there are certain things that can be used, like kitchen stuff, right? It gives you examples of regular household or other materials that can be substituted or used if you don't have the lab apparatus that is required. All right. So say, for example, your students need to create a model of a cell. You can use recyclables and that kind of thing. So level the questions. Think about one foundation, one developing, and one extension question that you would need to ask your students. And what skill do you think you would assess or mark for this particular lab? Feel free to answer any of them. All right, correct. Changing the skill you test each year adds variety. But you shouldn't be testing one skill for the entire year. I've never actually done that or seen that. I make sure that my students develop all the skills from grade 10. So I don't wait until grade 11 to be giving them a P&D, which I see a lot of teachers will do sometimes. They'll wait until grade 11, they're just doing a P&D. You should not be assessing the skill the first time the students are exposed to it. Give the students an opportunity to master the skill even before you start assessing it and counting it towards the SBA grade. So you should be doing these investigations throughout the year for every topic that you cover. And again, the textbook actually have practical activities, a whole lot of suggested practical activities for each topic, not just one. And it varies too on the different skill level. So you would look at a topic like energy transfer. There are several labs there that you can do ORR, M&M, AI, P&D. You should be looking at all the skills. Don't wait until the end to just the students. First time I do a drawing, that scares the students as well. The first time they're doing a drawing lab and oh, it's going towards the SBA. No, you don't want to do that. You want to give them opportunities right, throughout the year. All right, so planning a module. So how do you decide which module you're going to teach? And I want to make sure I get through this quickly before the time, because it's like 6 o'clock now. I want to ensure, how do you decide which module do you start first? I love the energy module because it seems a little bit shorter than the other two. So you may want to start with maybe the energy module, or do you want to start with our planet? You can decide which module you want to start with. What is important is that you catch the students early, you engage them, you make them excited about the subject and ensure that they want to learn, right? So of course, the 5E approach. Now, sequence the modules to your reality. So start with your strength, open with the module you teach most confidently, and that will engage your students early. Follow the module based on what you also have available. Some schools just have one lab and the entire school have to use that one lab and all the resources and they have to book the time and all of that. Now, when you're doing your planning sessions and getting ready to create, what I remember when I was teaching grade 9 and I had to put, we had the syllabus, but we had to decide the sequence, the order of what we teach. That's also based on the resources. We had to come together as a department and decide the approach that we were going to take. So this is what you're going to do, right? And again, the textbook is already in the different chapters. So say you decide to do energy module, you just take that chapter from the textbook and you start, you're done, right? And I love the approach where if you have slower students that may not be able to do all 3 modules, that you bank a credential early. Let them sit a module exam in grade 10. Can you imagine how they feel going into grade 11 knowing that them pass one part of the exam already? Huh? So they can actually bank a credential early from grade 10. So think about that, right? Teach practicals with what you have. So I mentioned that already, that the CSEC syllabus as well as the CSEC Integrated Science textbook that I showed you earlier actively backs low-cost practical work. It encourages devices from readily available materials and even discards. So you don't need to have a fully stocked lab. So improvise the apparatus, go virtual when you have to, and group, but students write alone. So students may do the activity in groups, but they have to write up the lab on their own. And of course, you may also do rotating of stations. So you may only have, say, a Bunsen burner, a few Bunsen burners, they may need to all use it, or a water bath, and they may all need to use it. Okay? So let the fourth edition by Miss Chung carry the planning load for you. So you have the 5 topics, 45 hours, building towards paper 2 and 2 SBA assessments. So say, for example, you're looking at conservation of energy, right? That you can look at KC and UK. So this is a way that you could plan it. So say I look at conservation of energy. This is module 2, right? And I'm looking at energy of life. I'm just focusing on use of knowledge and comprehension. I'm not assessing any SB skill for these 2 topics. But for the 4th topic in that same module, electricity and lighting, I decide to do a M&M experiment. You see how you can plan it, guys? So this is what I'm talking about. So you can decide. Temperature control, I decide to do ORR or AI for that topic. Okay? So the textbook's energy chapters basically would supply you with the content, supply you with the ITQs and practicals for every row, and your scheme of work is basically already written. Your SB is, sorry, your lesson plans are basically half written, right? And your unit plans are basically ready just by using the textbook. All right, so utilize teaching methods named throughout the syllabuses or syllabi rather, own learning activities. So these are the low prep, high engagement, and easy to differentiate methods. So think peer share. So I want to leave you with these practical strategies for sure. So students can think alone, discussing peers, then share out, build in support for weaker students before they commit their answers. They can think about that. Do teacher demos and guided videos. Ask students to make models from everyday materials. I remember getting some very interesting cell models that students would go home and build, using materials and resources from their home. And use up the level ITQs, right? So start with, the foundation ITQs where you're looking at recall or use of knowledge. And for those who, are at a certain level, you can use those extension ITQs. All right, so 1 module sequence and assessment map. So putting it all together. So as we said, for the module 2, you have conservation of energy. So we just do practice, and then we assess when we reach that particular topic. All right, we're not going to do this due to the interest of time. But it's important that you think about opening and, looking. So the first thing you could do is match that fourth edition chapter, right? With whatever module that you plan to do. So you pick up a module and a topic, you open the fourth edition chapter, and that is your source. You can choose practical activities from there. Look at the skills that you want to assess, and add a teaching tip. One way you can differentiate your work, make it a little bit different. So practical strategies, not extra pressure. So key takeaways for this presentation. I was rushing a while ago, so I'm trying to finish. So let me just take a breath. It's important that you sequence to your strengths. Teach the modules in the order that suits your class and your school or lab, right? It's also important that you're realistic as it relates to the resources that you have available. Assess as you teach. Build the SBA into normal lessons. Don't wait until the end to be assessing the skills. Lean on the textbook. It already maps the content, the activities are there, the experiments and are there, even classwork activities are there, and all the assessment is there for you. Remember, every good activity, right, can earn marks. So investigation prepares the students for paper 2 and the SBA all at once. Okay? So remember, this is the textbook. Again, Integrated Science for CSEC Examinations, 4th edition. You can find it. And again, you can go to the Macmillan website and download the mark scheme or the answers for all the ITQs as a PDF and have that as a valuable, trust me, that is a valuable resource to have, because those questions are really good questions that will challenge your students, that will help them to think critically, right? And that's where you want them to be. And that's how you will prepare them well for the exam. All right, thank you again for your time. That is the end of my presentation. I will check the chat to see if I see any messages. All right, so I'm hearing that persons are excited about the textbook. I love that. All right.
Yeah, I think you're very
Useful
well
to teach
received.
science. Okay, awesome.
All right, everybody. This was an exceptional session. Thank you so very much, all of you, for showing up. I would have dropped this in the chat a couple of times, but I'm going to say it again anyway. All the teachers in attendance today, or this evening rather, will get a certificate of attendance, and the slides that Cavell would have shared with you and discussed with you will be sent to you via email during the course of the evening. You will also receive a free 1 month e-sample code for the textbook so that you can peruse it yourself, get your own look and feel for it, and decide how it fits with your classroom. And this will be accessible on the ME platform, which is the Macmillan Education Everywhere platform. And the code for the teacher's resource that would have been shared with you earlier, and I believe it will be shared with you again via email. For anyone who might have missed it, looking at the webinar after the fact, aka tomorrow, if you're seeing us now, it's tomorrow. Um, then the recording will be on YouTube. This is where you'll be seeing us from, but you unfortunately will not be able to receive the attendance signed by Miss Hylton. You'll have to call her directly or message her directly for that. But if you wish to get the books, we can assure you that they are on your islands, and you just need to have a quick chat or look up with your local bookseller, and you should be able to find it. If you have any issues or questions on where you can find it, then you can check out our website, macmillan-caribbean.com. Click the About Us section and then click Local Booksellers, and you will find the ones that are within your territory, and you will be able to access all the resources that were discussed today. And if you have any questions about the online resources, the free stuff, please do ask them a question or feel free to send us an email and we will be happy to get back to you to make sure that you have everything that you need. If there are any other questions, I would like to open the floor now. If there are not, then I don't know. Is it tea time?
Yeah, I'm seeing some questions about where they can get it in the Bahamas, St. Lucia. And I think you mentioned that as well, that they can just click, just do a quick Google search, right?
Yes, they can do the macmillan-education.com, and then when you get there, go to the About Us, and then you can scroll down to the local booksellers, and that will you'll find your island there, and that will tell you exactly where you can find what you need domestically.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Yes, please. Okay. Okay. All right, everybody. Um, okay. Emails are coming in. I love that. I would like to presume that everyone sending their emails in the chat would have registered normally. If you have not, and this is your way of registering now, then I will try my best to make sure that the team in the UK office receives that and that your certificates are properly organized. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening, and I do hope that you have a restful one and yeah, drink some tea. Chamomile is my go-to. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for your help. Bye.